Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am Xavier Smith, and today I'm going to teach you how to graph a fully translated tangent function. So let's start with some background. Our graph of tangent, we have our unit circle with 0, pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, pi, 5 pi over 4, 3 pi over 2, 7 pi over 4, and 2 pi. If you would like to watch me graph this and see how to graph it, please watch my video on the graph of tangent. So let's just start and get to the main points of this. First of all, you have a middle point. This middle point, we're just going to use pi as the example here. This middle point is on the midline and is your horizontal shift. Then you have asymptotes. Your asymptotes are defining the ends, the start and end of your period. So from pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2 is one period. Because you see pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, oh, full graph. Then 3 pi over 2 to 9 pi over 4. Oh, from 3 pi over 2 to 5 pi over 2. Sorry, I didn't put that point down. Is another pi. Is another full period. So from pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2, that's pi. Then from 3 pi over 2 to 5 pi over 2 is also pi. So a period of tangent is pi. Then you have these things called halfway points, halfway between the middle point, your horizontal shift, and your vertical asymptote. You have it on both sides. You have a vertical asymptote start and end of your period. Then you have your horizontal shift in the middle. Then your halfway points are halfway between on both sides. And those points are just up the amplitude on one side and down the amplitude on the other side. So here our amplitude is 1, so we go up on the right side and down on the left side. Our tangent is sine over cosine is equal to y over x, which is why we have asymptotes. If you would like more explanation on that, please go watch the other video on the graph of tangent. Then transformations. Our standard form is y equals a tangent b of x minus h plus k. That's a lot, but it is very similar to sine and cosine. The graph just looks way different. A is our amplitude, which is our halfway point distance from the midline. So there's the midline, there's our halfway point, and then our amplitude up, and then our amplitude down. B determines period. Our period is pi over b, because remember we just said our base period of tangent is pi. So pi over b. So if b is 2, then we have pi over 2. So if b is greater than 1, our period shrinks and our graph compresses. If b is 1/2, then our period is 2 pi. So if b is less than 1, our graph stretches and our period gets larger. H is our horizontal / phase shift, and K is our vertical shift, which determines our midline. Scale. So our points in order go vertical asymptote, then halfway point, then your horizontal shift, then your halfway point, then your vertical asymptote. So vertical asymptote, halfway point, horizontal shift, halfway point, vertical asymptote. So we just plot these. We find our vertical asymptotes, find our halfway points, and our horizontal shift. Then we just plot them. We have negative pi over 2, negative pi over 4, 0, pi over 4, pi over 2. This is just base tangent. Once we have all these points plotted, we can find the scale. So from negative pi over 2 to negative pi over 4, I see that goes up pi over 4. Negative pi over 4 to 0, that goes up pi over 4. So we're going up pi over 4 every time, so our scale is by pi over 4. Now, let's start talking about vertical asymptotes and halfway points, and then we will get to graphing. These, I would say, are the most complicated parts of tangent. So our vertical asymptote equation is x equals h plus or minus pi over 2b. H is our horizontal shift. 2b is just, I don't know, b determines your period again. So it changes your period, but that'll be elaborated more on later. So our diagram of showing this. A normal period is pi of tangent. We are just saying b equals 1 right now. So from one asymptote to the other asymptote, our period is pi. Then from our horizontal shift, which is in the middle of the two, it is half a period, which is pi over 2. It's pi over 2 in both ways. Because again, period pi, if the horizontal shift is directly in the middle, then half of pi is pi over 2. So where the b comes in is if you say the period, well, let's say b is 2. Then the period would be pi over 2. But then that means we have pi over 2. Half of pi over 2 would be pi over 4. So then this pi over 2b would really be pi over 4. And then this horizontal shift it's really just, you'll see it. You'll know where the horizontal shift is, and then you just calculate how far you have to go from it. But we're saying this horizontal shift here is 0. But if this horizontal shift was, let's just say horizontal shift is pi over 2, then period is pi, then pi over 2 plus or minus, that would be pi over 2. So our vertical asymptotes would be at 0 and pi, which we have pi over 2 in the middle, and then there's our period will be pi. So it starts at 0 and goes to pi. Pi over 2 is directly in the middle, so we're good. Then halfway points are h plus or minus pi over 4b, comma, k plus or minus a. So let's do this one at a time. First of all, we have the period of pi. Again, base period, base tangent, from asymptote to asymptote. Then from horizontal shift to asymptote is half the period, which is pi over 2. Again, we've already said that in this last one. Then from midway between the asymptote, halfway between the asymptote and the horizontal shift is half of the period, which is 1/4 the period, which would be pi over 4. And pi over 4b, again, follows the same rule as this one, which is pi over 2b. Like if we said b is 1/2, then this period would be 2b. Well, this period would be 2 pi. Then this half period would be pi. And then this 1/4 period would be pi over 2. It's just 1/4 of the period. Then your plus or minus a, your midline is y equals k. So you're already at your midline. Well, you should be if you graphed it correctly. Then on the right side, if your a is positive, then you will be traveling up a units. On your left side, you'll be traveling down a units. Now, I hope I could explain that to you. If that did not work, please leave a comment. I do not want you going without knowing how to graph those things. It is horrible not knowing how to graph those things. Trust me, it's not good. So let's transform tangent. Our equation is y equals 3 tangent 4 of x plus pi over 2 minus 2. Our a value, our amplitude is 3. Our b is 4, meaning that our period is pi over b is pi over 4. Our horizontal shift is negative pi over 2. We're moving pi over 2 to the left because, remember, positive pi over 2 means we're moving left. Negative pi over 2. When it's a positive in here, you're moving left. When it's a negative in there, you're moving right. Then vertical shift is negative 2, meaning our midline at y equals k is y equals negative 2. Let's start graphing. First, we will graph our horizontal shift. Right? Negative pi over 2. I'm just going to put that in the middle over here. Negative pi over 2. Then, we should find the vertical asymptotes. But first, I'm going to put in the midline, y equals negative 2. So just dotted line, y equals negative 2. So now let's find the vertical asymptotes. Our equation is x equals h plus or minus pi over 2b. Ooh, that's not a good pi. Pi over 2b. So x equals h is negative pi over 2. negative pi over 2 plus or minus pi over 2. B is 4 times 4. So we have x equals negative pi over, let's leave that, pi plus minus pi over 8. Common denominator would make this negative pi over 2 into negative 4 pi over 8. So negative pi over 4, negative 4 pi over 8 plus pi over 4 plus pi over 8 would give us negative 3 pi over 8. So x equals negative 3 pi over 8, comma, negative 4 pi over 8 minus pi over 8 would give us negative 5 pi over 8. So we have negative 3 pi over 8 and negative 5 pi over 8 as x asymptotes. So let's graph those. Let's find negative 5 pi over 8. Let's just say is right here. Negative 5 pi over 8. This may not look to scale because I may have put negative pi over 2 in a weird place. Then negative 3 pi over 8 we're going to put here. Oh, negative 3 pi over 8. So we have negative 5 pi over 8, then blank, then negative pi over 2, then blank, negative 3 pi over 8. We have our two asymptotes. We have our midway point. Remember, I'm going to use a different color for this, for our points. We can put on the midline at our horizontal shift. Then we have to find the halfway points. Remember, our formula is h plus or minus pi over 4b comma k plus or minus a, I believe. So let's start. H plus or minus pi over 4b. Well, we already know it's between negative 5 pi over 8 and negative pi over 2, which is really negative 5 pi over 8 and negative 4 pi over 8. But still going to do the formula. So H is negative pi over 2 plus and minus pi over 4 times 4, which would give us, let's do negative pi over 2 plus or minus pi over 16, which is really negative 8 pi over 16 plus or minus pi over 16, getting a common denominator. So we have negative pi over 8, negative 8 pi over 16 plus pi over 16 is negative 7 pi over 16. So negative 7 pi over 16, and then negative 8 pi over 16 minus pi over 16 is negative 9 pi over 16. So this point would be negative 7 pi over 16, and then this point would be negative 9 pi over 16. So we got our x values. Now we have to do k plus or minus a. Well, what's our k? Our k is minus 2, which is our midline. So minus 2 plus or minus a is 3, which equals negative 2 plus 3 is 1, and negative 2 minus 3 is negative 5. Remember, when a is positive, we're going up on the right side and down on the left side. There are ways to check this, but we don't have to check it. So at negative 7 pi over 16, we're going up to 1. And then at negative 9 pi over 16, we're going down to negative 5. And then we have our graph. Looks a little bad. But remember that with the amplitude, you're always just these halfway points. It's halfway between your asymptote and your horizontal shift, and you're just going up your amplitude from there. So our amplitude is 3. So we're at -2, then we go up 3, -2, -1, 0, 1. Then we go down 3 on the left, -2, -3, -4, -5. All right, now, finally, we get our scale. Our scale, -5 pi over 8, then -9 pi over 16, -pi over 2, -7 pi over 16, -3 pi over 8. So what is it? Well, -5 pi over 8, really, -10 pi over 8. Oh, -10 pi over 16. Then we go to -9 pi over 16. Well, that's going by pi over 16. Then we go to negative pi over 2, which is really -8 pi over 16. So we are going by pi over 16. So our scale is pi over 16. Please leave a comment if you have any questions on tangent. There should be videos on all of this individually, but this is all of the transformations put together. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you. Thank you.